When I was just getting started as an investor, one of my first questions was, should I invest in a house or should I invest in a unit? So one of my favorite books is by Fred Harrison and it's called The Power is in the Land. And we really do believe that the power in investing is in getting the biggest piece of land possible. Now, you've just checked out some incredible info from CoreLogic. What are those guys saying?
One of the recent studies that they did looked at 30 years worth of capital gains in Australia, looking at all of the different asset classes that we can invest in. Now, what they realized from this study was that houses in the metro markets around Australia on average have gone up 453% over the last 30 years. And that was the highest performing asset in Australia over the last 30 years. And then second to that was actually houses in regional markets as well, which have gone up by 313% over the last 30 years. And then when we look at units, both in the metro markets and the regional markets over the last 30 years, both of those have underperformed in comparison to the houses. Now, units in the metro markets have gone up just 306% over the last 30 years. And then units in regional markets have only gone up 212% over the last 30 years. So what this tells me is that if you're going to be a long-term investor like we are, you really want to be ideally buying houses in the metro markets or houses in the major regional markets.
You know, that data is so significant to Simon and I because even in the metro markets, houses have outperformed the units by over 140%. Now, as an investor who's going to accumulate an extremely small number of properties over my lifetime, I want to make sure that every single dollar I put down is working as hard as possible for me. When it comes to the holding costs of houses versus units, they're relatively similar, but from my experience of owning a unit and many houses, the extra costs associated with units are generally strata and body corporate. In my experience, the body corporate fees, strata fees, and then seeking fund fees can sometimes catch up with you. And outside of CoreLogic's analysis of history, those extra holding costs mean that I personally don't target them as an investor.
And I'm the same as you. You know, I much prefer to go for houses over units because of the future capital growth potential, because of the cash flow, but also because of your value add potential. For me as an active investor, I want to get my hands dirty and I want to add some value to the property. When you buy a house, you've got a lot of opportunity to add value through a small cosmetic renovation, maybe a larger structural renovation or a knockdown rebuild. You could maybe add a granny flat in the backyard if you can legally do something like that, or maybe even go crazy and do like a subdivision if you can legally do that as well.
You know, I remember renovating my unit and obviously doing the bathroom and the kitchen, the flooring, a bit of a paint job, the fans, the lights, and all of that sort of stuff. And then once it was done, I was like, oh shit. And at that particular time, the market wasn't doing so well. And because I was in a complex with more than 150 other units, I also realized that my valuation and my rent return was dependent on the person in the building that was actually in the worst financial position. And what I mean by that is at the time my unit was worth about $450K after completing the renovation in Sydney. This is in the good old days back in sort of 2012 and 13. But one of my neighbors needed to get out of the property, had busted up with his missus and was happy to sell the same unit on the same floor for about $380K. So it completely destroyed my valuation. You know, what I learned from that experience is I definitely want to be in control of my asset. I want to be in a suburb surrounded by other people who share a similar view to me, like Simon said, adding value slowly over time to the properties that they own.
Now, for us as property investors, it is super simple. The data suggests that houses outperform units over the longer term. So we're going to go out there and acquire those houses to put us into a position where we can generate the best return on investment whilst holding that asset. Now, if you haven't already done so, could you please subscribe to our YouTube channel so we can grow this channel and give us a thumbs up. But best of all, please share this video with somebody who's not sure whether they should be buying a house or a unit for their next investment property.
Woo!
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Getting cool, bro. Yeah.
Oh, sweaty. So sweaty. Oh, that's good. Look at that. So nice, eh? Oh.